So I'm going to briefly introduce everybody here. My colleagues, Chris Granger, many of you probably are familiar with his work, longtime photojournalist in the city of New Orleans. As Chris likes to say, he covers the good, the bad, and the ugly every day of New Orleans. This book is all the good. And we were honored to have his beautiful eye help tell this story. Danielle Del Sol is the executive director of the Preservation Resource Center. She is an expert in historic preservation with a master's from the Tulane School of Architecture, but also has a journalism background and was editor of Preservation and Print magazine prior to me being editor of Preservation and Print magazine. And then Mr. John Pope needs no introduction. Longtime journalist in the city of New Orleans, has covered pretty much everything about the city, but very much the culture of the city. And so he was the perfect person to help us tell some of these stories as we looked at examining the why of color in our historic built environment. And so this is going to be a conversation. We would love questions, and so we'll talk, we'll give a little spiel, but then we would love to open this up and hear from you and what you see when you're out in the city every day. So this book seems almost too on the nose. Like the topic of it is New Orleans is a colorful city. And it was like, well, yeah, we all know that. And we were shocked when we first started talking about it. The book was Danielle's idea. And it was so like obvious that it was surprising no one had done it already. And so we were like, okay, well, let's us do this book. And it'll be just this beautiful, joyous look at the city. But once we started diving into it, we clearly started to realize that it was a much more complex topic than what we initially thought, which was just a celebration of the beauty. It brings the history, the culture, the religious backgrounds, the diaspora that founded the city, have all of this impact on why New Orleans looks the way it does, and why other cities of our same age in the United States don't look like us. And so once we started to peel those layers back, we were like, whoa, this book is different than what we originally thought, in the best way. Because then we started to really, like, our minds were kind of blown as we started to learn more about why this happened as in New Orleans. So I'm going to start with right at the beginning. You know, when we started to look at this, we know it's colorful today, but I'm going to pass this to Danielle to tell us, how do we even know what New Orleans historically looked like 300 years ago when it was founded, before color photography? There was a lot of artistic paintings of the city, but how do we know they weren't just taking artistic license?
So New Orleans has an incredible repository called the Notarial Archives, which is unique in the United States and perhaps unique in the world. We have not found another one like it. But it was established by the French early in the city's history and has thousands upon thousands of legal documents. So everything from real estate record sales to marriages to any sort of sale or legal transaction, money changing hands in the city was recorded by notaries and kept and then given to this repository, which is still to this day managed by the Civil District Court of New Orleans. And part of this repository are thousands of these incredible watercolor paintings that were actually real estate ads, that most of them date from the 19th century, so early 1800 to late 1800s. And they are completely accurate because they are legal documents. So what you see advertised here, and they were posted on the front of the church because everyone would go there and see them, they had to be accurate in terms of square footage, the look, the land surrounding it, how that appears, its siting on the block and in the city, and also its colors. And so we know that this is not artistic license. These watercolorists, yes, were amazing artists. These are beautiful paintings, but they are meant to be legal documents and sale. They're Zillow. They're today's Zillow. You know, today we have Zillow. That was their Zillow. And so it's really incredible that we have this record and these paintings to prove that indeed in the original city, which was the French Quarter, and then as it grew, the downtown neighborhoods, Tremé, Marigny, Bywater, we have this incredible record of what these properties looked like.
A fun fact from this was when they would post these sale documents, they would post them, originally they would post them on the church because they knew everybody was going to be at St. Louis Cathedral at some point in time during the week. But then as the city grew, they would sometimes post them in different locations. The notice would have the date where the sale was going to be. You could go and bid, and it would have the date and time, and you could go place your bid for the piece of property. And the way they would determine when the bid stopped was they lit a candle, and when the candle burned to a certain depth, the bid was over, and that was it. Sally Reeves, who was the longtime archivist for the city of New Orleans,
The Notarial
for the
Archives.
Notarial Archives, pardon me, wrote the essay about this in the book. And it's just such a fascinating treasure that we have that so many other cities don't have.
Right, and so that was our first, this is how we know this is true, that New Orleans has always been a very colorful and vibrant place. The second part is a more recent scientific methodology of paint analysis. So you can take a sample from a historic building and look under some very fine microscopes and see every single layer of paint that a building was painted over the years, going back to the original color. And so we have some experts here in the city that do this. Michelle Duhan is a preservationist who wrote the opening chapter of our book that really explains the why we're such a historically colorful city and how we know that. So she really goes into it, and she does this work herself, and she was actually the consultant on this building, which is the Dodwell House. It's on the corner of Esplanade and Claiborne in the Treme neighborhood, and it was purchased a few years ago by St. Anna's Episcopal Church, which is a few doors down on Esplanade, and they wanted to restore it, but they wanted it to be completely accurate to its original look. And so they hired Michelle. She did paint samples and found that this beautiful kind of burnt red was indeed the original color of this building. And so they recreated the red and painted it that color.
And that chapter in the book really also explores the why. So we know that historically we were as colorful as we are today, which is pretty incredible to know. But then other cities of our same age, if you look at Charleston, if you look at Savannah, they are not this way. They are much more neutral palette. And so when we started to go, well, why is that? Why did New Orleans grow one way and these other cities grow another? And so, Danielle, you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Really, it cannot be understated the cultural values that the people who came to New Orleans in the early 1700s brought with them from Europe and from Africa. So the people who settled, we know there were native peoples here and that they actually used colors in their art. So we know that was already here. And then when the French came and settled New Orleans in 1718, they were Catholics. And so they brought this history of Catholicism and the symbolism that Catholicism uses in religious art in the churches, stained glass, robes. Think about it, rich reds, blues, yellows. This was what they brought with them as symbols of power, symbols of grandeur. And so the French and then the Spanish, also Catholic, who came, really had this as part of their background. That was part of their history. That's who they were as a people, was embracing color, seeing color as beauty and beautiful manifestations. And of course, the enslaved people who were brought over from Africa, and then later the free people of color who came from Haiti and the Caribbean, also, had from African roots, embracing of color and color as part of their culture. So it was a colorful people who settled New Orleans. And then about the early to mid 1800s, as the Northeasterners, who were Americans, who were from Northern Europe, Northern European descent, the Protestants came, and they brought with them a love of the color white, because in Protestant religions, white means purity, simplicity, pureness, close to godliness. And so a love of white and more neutral palettes came with the Americans who came. And for those of you who know your New Orleans history, the Americans and the Creoles meaning people of European and African descent and all the mixture of that, the Creoles really had the downtown on lock. That was their sector. And when the Americans came in, they wanted nothing. The Creoles wanted Americans not in their area, and the Americans didn't want to be there anyways. So they started developing upriver of Faubourg Saint Marie, which is across Canal Street, what we know today is a central business district, warehouse district, then further on, Lower Garden District, uptown. And fascinatingly, as we were, as Chris was taking photographs around the city, and we really opened our eyes driving around the city, we realized, these traditions have held true. You go downtown today, you go to the Marigny Bywater, you can't throw a rock without hitting a tropical colored house. And in the Garden District uptown, it really is, you will see a lot more neutral of the palettes. And the rise of Greek Revival style architecture in the mid-1800s also gave way to this as well, because that was the use of a lot of white, big, prominent columns, white paint, that sort of thing.
Well, and while this is all going on, we were interviewing a lot of historians and historic preservation experts, architectural crafts experts. And the first thing they told us, Danielle and I had a meeting with someone, and he said, you have to throw out the notions that you have about color and paint from a modern standpoint. It is not, it would be completely foreign concepts to anyone in the 19th century that you could go to a store and pick any color of the rainbow. It just wasn't that way. The technology wasn't there. They really didn't start mass producing paint where you could go to a store and buy a can until after the 1920s. So the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, when you wanted to paint a building, you had a craftsperson, an artisan, quite literally, almost like a decorative painter. And they hand mixed these pigments into a base, typically lead white, and it was very toxic stuff. Did wear well, not so much on the people. We do have a chapter on lead paint as well, so some things you should know about. But these ochre pigments are from the Luberon of France. There's a historic preservationist in New Orleans, Elizabeth Simpson, who did her dissertation at the Tulane School of Architecture all about the original pigments that paint was used here in New Orleans for paints. And she let us take pictures of these samples and the ochre paints, and they would hand mix this. So if you wanted to paint your house, you went to the artisan in your neighborhood, and you didn't have every option. Different paints, different pigments were incredibly expensive. And so cost was a major factor, availability was a major factor. So you got to pick from a very small palette. It wasn't like walking into Helm Paint today. So talking about the religion and the cultures that developed here and why of color leads us to a chapter that John wrote, which I found one of the most fascinating parts of the book. I had no idea as a native New Orleanian that tombs in the Creole cemeteries actually were colorful once upon a time. John, do you want to tell us about
It was amazing. Chris Granger and I wandered through St. Louis number 1 one freezing cold day, and we found that tomb. It was that Michel Duhon had restored. It's beautiful. Also in St. Louis number 1, there's this big blue block for people who were in Washington Artillery who fought in the Battle of New Orleans. At the other side of the cemetery, there's what is known as the Faux Laveau tomb. People thought it was Marie Laveau's. Well, it wasn't. It was this feuding family, this man and his 2 daughters, who were now together for eternity in this blue tomb that Michel restored. The cemeteries were a confluence of cultures: Creole, Italian, Spanish, French, and African, but Catholic. Now, I love this.
Yeah,
This is the Contessa and Tulane Society. It's a benefit, like a social aid and pleasure club. It's in Metairie Cemetery. And again, Michel Duhon, about whom too much good cannot be said. Yeah. She restored that tomb, and she played around with the colors to get a cloud effect. You'll notice.
So it looks like clouds.
And it's gorgeous.
Yeah, in the book, you actually see, this picture's cropped up here, but in the book, you see the whole image. And we talk about the, the blue ceilings on front porches. Most every New Orleans house has it. This tomb is about the size of this room. That's me standing in it, shooting it. And so anyway, I went in there to photograph it for the book and got close-ups and details. And I was kind of, just too far into it. And then I went back at the cemetery. This is Metairie Cemetery. You can drive in front of the tombs. Went back to my car. As I was done, I turned around, and the sky of that day is the exact same as the ceiling.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the book. But it was just, I had that epiphany where it's like, wow, now I see why they're made that way.
And Michel knows enough about colors and the way they work to make this blend look like clouds.
Yeah.
In case anybody ever asks you, doing these colors, it's all about lime wash.
Yeah.
And you know how you get lime wash by grinding down oyster shells for calcium carbonate, which is the main ingredient. Then you add the pigments. And blue, as I recall, is extremely expensive, as in royal blue. And there are many factors that go into determining what you use, your wealth and your culture. And it's just absolutely fascinating.
Lime wash is the reason, that the cemeteries don't look like that anymore. They're not colorful anymore. It's
Yeah.
very expensive, to have a tinted wash on a tomb. It fades. You have to redo it every few years. So people will just come in with a bucket of white.
I was about to take the
Yeah.
I was about to take the rap from my fellow Protestants. Because for some reason, again, it's what Danielle was talking about, white being purity. White latex paint. They just couldn't get enough white latex paint to paint tombs. Well, it may be white and pure, but it also death on the pardon the expression. It's death on the tomb, because lime wash lets the tomb breathe. Water can come in, water can come out. With latex, you just lock the water in, and it's really ugly. Mold, mildew, and there you are.
Each of these tombs that we've shown here, this was their original colorway. This wasn't a modern choice. Michelle Duhan, who we keep referencing, this historic
Can we-
preservation expert, she's an expert in.
Can we tell that story right there on that slide?
Yeah, let me finish this real quick.
Okay.
They
We had fun making this book.
Yeah.
we had fun making this book.
It took a year to do it.
Right, we're like a big family.
Yes.
We get very excited, but Michelle in St. Louis #1 was asked to do a forensic paint analysis of that red tomb and the blue tomb to determine what the original colorway was, and restored it to that. So these are bringing back colors that over the years, like Danielle has said, have faded and gone away. So in the book, Latrobe, the famous architect, has a painting that he did of St. Louis #1 that shows these colorful tombs in the 19th century, which is really quite an amazing thing. So, okay, John, you can
Well-
tell this story.
While we're on that photograph, I should point out in Chris's defense, nothing was photoshopped
Yeah.
for this book. It is as he saw it.
Yeah, this is Esplanade Avenue, the Degas House.
And when we
stretch.
were selling the book during the PRC's holiday home tour, one man came up to me and said, "You've caused quite a controversy in our family." I said, "Oh, cool." And see the man on the front? That was the man who spoke to me. Apparently his wife had made him promise never to drive a motorcycle or scooter without a helmet. Busted.
With his daughter texting on the back
Yeah,
and not holding
that's a
on.
mess of trouble.
An even worse offense.
Yeah, so for this book,
Trouble.
the hardest part was trying to find a clean street, and without sewage and water board trucks everywhere or whatever, or a lack of whatever. But anyway, I tried to find days of just showing the houses and without many people. There's a couple of photos with people in the shot, but I just thought that kind of gave it a European flair to it. But Sunday mornings are good to take pictures of houses around New Orleans.
Well, that's a good segue, Chris. So he had the hardest job of all. So the most open-ended assignment you can imagine as a photographer is, hey, go take pictures of color in the city of New Orleans. So how did you approach this?
Yeah, the hardest part with any book like this is just how do you start, right? From scratch. Monday morning, let's start this book, and where do you go? New Orleans is such, as we said, a colorful place, and we first decided to do it by color. We'll do red houses, we'll do yellow houses, we'll do blue houses, and so that lasted for about a day, because I would go to the yellow house and. And these are all randomly found, which, by the way, there's no addresses in this house, in this book.
Purposely.
Purposely, yeah. It's just kind of a generic kind of view, timeless view, I guess. But anyway, so I'd go photograph a yellow house, and to the side of it next door was this beautiful blue house. And I thought, well, maybe I should shoot that while I'm here. So then it became this just odyssey of traveling the city, mostly by foot and by bike, because it's a great way to really slow down and see things that we may pass all the time. Going up the one-way street that we always go down 1,000 times in our lives and actually go the opposite way, and you see it totally differently. So it was a lot of fun, and So you might be a little confused by what you're seeing on here. You're thinking this is a book on houses. When we were choosing the colors, again, red, yellow, blue, we were saying, well, what kind of blue? What is it? Is it like kind of more of a lavender bent to it, or the yellow? Was it more of like a Satsuma orange, or was it a navel orange? So we decided to celebrate our life down here, our culture, to blend the book with photos that complement the colors. So you'll see crawfish. You'll see a Bloody Mary. In the back of the book, it's more purple, I'd say, themes. But anyway, we just thought instead of just having house after house after house after house in the book, let's blend it with, I'm going to jump around. Like, here's a good example.
Snowball.
Snowball.
This house, when Chris found it, if you look at this picture closely, every piece of trim is painted a different color. And I just want to go, I want to meet these people who did this, because wow. And we all looked at that and thought, it looks like a snowball.
Yeah.
And so we put the snowball.
Yeah. Again, just a celebration
It's
of.
just, and we mean that in the best possible way.
Yeah.
And can I just say real quick, I mean,
Yeah.
the timing of us creating this book, we wanted there to be historical heft, and there is. So we have essays by experts on the why. We're such a colorful city, how we know that. Lead paint, as Susan said. We have actually a color expert, Louis Aubert. Some of you may know him. He's pretty locally famous on being the guy who knows about historic color. So he was our advisor, and he helped pair us with Benjamin Moore colors that we put. So we had a level of practicality. There's a list Louis picks in the book. So that, you know, because it's overwhelming. You go into the paint store and there's 1,000 whites to choose from, and they're all slightly different. So Louis gives you 5 whites, 5 blues, 5 greens. Pick any one of them, you'll do great. Yeah. So we wanted the level of practicality too. But so we wanted, as Susan was said, we couldn't believe that this hadn't been done, and we wanted to do this book on, and then Chris's photos make it almost like this gorgeous coffee table book too. So there's all these elements to what this book is, but it was also a moment in time where we realized this book needs to bring joy to the people of the city, to the residents of the city. We started this book in 2022. We still were in this like post-Ida malaise where everyone was just grumpy. And, you know, we had trash issues and we had sewer and water board issues, and everyone was just, we felt like this was an opportunity to bring joy. And like Chris said, when we started realizing we needed to splice in elements of our culture, because this is such a colorful city on every level. Yes, the architecture, but the food and everything else. And so we really wanted this to serve that purpose as well.
Well, you don't look at things in a vacuum. Your eye isn't only looking at a house like this. It's seeing everything around it, and Louis Aubert talks about that and gives real tips on, like, if you're approaching painting your house, what are the things you should be considering beyond just what is my favorite color. And so when we started to explore it, those azaleas next to the streetcar, you know, it's just a perfect match. And you don't realize it until we started putting them together. It was almost like a child's matching game. Liz Jury is the incredible art director for this project. And she would say, we would do these matches, and she would say, this is so satisfying. And it was like, that's filet, that house is filet. So Chris, gets to the point where these photos were not taken during golden hour. And there was a real idea behind why and when you shot these.
Right. Most of these photos, and you'll see somewhere it was a clear blue sky, because these houses were, especially the Marigny and Bywater, really will pop on a bright, beautiful day. But most of it, the big issue I had was in the golden hour, right? Sunrise, sunset. Everything has kind of an orangish, warm glow. And if it's a white house, that house is going to look orangish yellow. So I really wanted to be accurate with the colors. And so I purposely did, I'd say about 90% of the photography on high overcast days. So it's just sort of a neutral color of cast. It was just kind of a bland, kind of grayish white. But it really made the colors of the houses stand out. And so none of these photos are photoshopped. They are right on, you know, exactly how they look. And I've joked, there's one house, and I don't think we have the slideshow of it. We kept it so authentic. There's a couple of photos with, I think we have trash cans in front of them, cones. It was such a, and I was going to go back and get the house, you know, hopefully they had cleared everything up. It was this fantastic house. It might be one of my favorites. It's a black and yellow horizontal striped across.
A bumblebee.
It's a bumblebee.
It's like a bumblebee.
It's a bumblebee. And a little segue here, but I found it off of St. Claude Avenue towards Florida Avenue. So I drove all over the city for this book. I purposely went to locations that were not high traffic. You know, I really didn't do much on St. Charles Avenue. As lovely as it is, there are houses of St. Charles Avenue in there. But I really wanted to hit the nooks and crannies, the dead-end streets, the ones that people might be hesitant to drive down for whatever reason. I walked and drove down them, and so it's a broad spectrum of color and locations.
And it has so much humor.
Yeah.
So many things that he found.
New Orleanians are crazy.
New Orleans are, and it made us just totally crack up laughing. In addition to this photo, which
And all these were just randomly found, by the way.
randomly found.
I mean, if you're following me, I'm sorry to anybody who happened to be behind a little black Toyota truck, because I would suddenly stop really hard and pull over because I'm like, I got to get a photo of this.
One of the, we don't have a slide of it, but if you have to get the book to see it, someone took the gas meter that is in front of their home and painted it to look like a flamingo. And it is the most hilarious picture, and we were signing books at Blue Cypress Books right after it came out.
I know it'd be hard to see.
And
Oops, okay. It's hard to
you
see,
might
I
be
know,
able to
but
see it. And the person who owns this house, because we don't know the owners, like
Yeah.
purposely, this is all from the street.
yeah, I'm amazed out of the hundreds of homes I've photographed. I didn't ask for permission. I did it from the street.
street.
Well, it was from the street. And if anyone
Totally
stopped me
legal.
or asked me, I would have asked me what I was doing. I would have told them. I said, "Your house is lovely. I want to photograph it for a book." And we didn't, like I said, we didn't put addresses, so we weren't too worried about it. But yeah, no one stopped me. Not once in a year did they ask what I was doing.
But the person whose flamingo gas meter came at Blue Cypress Books and said, "That's my house," and I was like, "Just you got to tell me the story."
We were a little worried because they were like, "That's my house." We're like, "Uh-oh." And I was like, "I got to go."
But he was like, there was a muralist down the street, and he was just inspired by the muralist, and so asked her to see what she could do, and she came up with the flamingo, and I was like, I love New Orleanians. We are the most creative people. Okay, I know we're getting tight on time, but I wanted to get to John. If you could flip to K&B Purple.
Oh,
So John
my favorite.
had
A lot of
the-
purple in New Orleans, by
Yeah.
the way.
John had the hard task of
come back to
doing some of the cultural iconic
K&B.
colors.
K&B.
So tell us about K&B Purple.
Well, it all began in 1907 when two pharmacists opened a drugstore on Canal Street. They needed wrapping paper. There are three versions of how they got purple paper. One, the wife of one of the druggists found a whole bunch of paper that no one wanted. And the two other stories dealt with people who had lots of purple paper that they didn't know what to do with. So she snapped it up, and voila, an iconic color was born. Those of us how many people grew up in New Orleans and knew from K&B? I want a show of hands here.
All right.
Nope.
God.
And purple, you made purple vests and purple everything. And I don't think there was purple ice cream, but it was just purple.
Yeah, when I turned a corner, I knew in back of my mind I needed to capture purple, K&B Purple. And I literally I parked my car, started walking, and I walked around the side of this building. It was like
That's it.
you could hear angels go, ah! I was like, there it is, the purple.
We had a lot of discussion, though, because we know this is New Orleans, and if you don't get it right, you were going to hear it. And
Yeah.
so we were like, is it K&B Purple? To the point where I actually located an original matches that are K&B matches from who knows when, 1960, and we had them, and we like
You held it next
up
to the photo,
and
yeah.
made sure that the colors kind of matched. And there is a fun story about the Times-Picayune.
Disclosure, I have K&B purple shutters
Ah,
on my
yes,
house. Second disclosure,
the ink.
because the ink, the K&B ads used purple ink. When I was researching this story, I learned that the Times-Picayune used more purple ink than any other newspaper in the country for these advertisements.
For all the ads. Yeah.
Now, while I'm on iconic colors,
Oh, yeah.
Go back.
okay, there were
Hold on. Sorry we're
Okay.
jumping around, but yeah.
Commander's Palace. You recognize Commander's Palace. Okay. It stands out. I mean, yes, it's a big old colossus of a building that dominates the intersection at Washington and Coliseum. And Ella Brennan, bless her heart, well, she had been fired from Brennan's restaurant where she had worked, and she foresighfully had bought Commander's in 1969, and so she had the foresight to paint it this color so that people would know they were shaking things up. I mean, we're talking, this is the Garden District, for heaven's sake, where there are oh so tastefully done restorations, one right after the other. Everything. I mean, if they were people, they would bend the pinky when they used a teacup. That's how proper they were. But, I mean, T. Martin, her daughter, was horrified, and she said, no, no. I want people to know we're shaking things up. Well, Ella Brennan's glamorous sister, Adelaide, had a designer friend who came up with this color. And besides being striking, it also bears up well under heat and humidity, which are two challenges in this climate. Mm-hmm. And I was talking with T. Martin and her cousin Lally Brennan, who are the restaurant's owners. They cannot agree on what the color is. Mm-hmm. I mean, T just started riffing. She said, well, it's not really turquoise and it's not aqua. Is it teal? I don't know. But they both agree that it ages beautifully. Now, this Brennan's had been a purveyor for years of breakfast at Brennan's. It used to be the home of a Supreme Court justice, state Supreme Court justice, whose son Paul Morphy was a chess whiz. Anyway, when the Brennan's family split, and those of us who were around then remember, this is one of these great schisms that happened. I mean, you thought the Civil War was something? You ain't seen nothing. I mean, the people, and on one side did not talk about it to outsiders. No, 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 no. But so, I mean, Ella and her kin went upstairs. The Owen Brennan's widow and her three sons had Brennan's, and after a lot of litigation, Ralph Brennan, who was part of Ella's part of the family, and a business partner bought it and spent a lot of money restoring it. So I was talking with Ralph about it, and see those colors? I said, Ralph, I mean, we're talking fancy paint language here. And I said, Ralph, what are those colors? He said, okay, cream tomato soup, and the white trim, mayonnaise. I said, He said, oh yeah. And it was just, it's stuff when a reporter hears something like, the reporter just wants to hug himself and think, this is too damn good.
Well, we can stay in the French Quarter for a minute, and Danielle got into, in the book, some of the history of the misconceptions in the town about where color is regulated in historic preservation rules and regulations, and why.
Yeah, we have, something like 25 historic districts in New Orleans or more, and there are misconceptions about what you can and can't do, but the truth is that the French Quarter is the only district where paint color is regulated. And it is. If you own a property in the French Quarter and you want to paint anything, even a door or a shutter, you have to go before the Vieux-Carré Commission, which is part of the City of New Orleans government, and ask for approval. And they are very strict. They want the quarter to stay true to its original colorways and remain a historic district in the truest sense of when you walk through the French Quarter, you see what it may have once looked like. And so one of the most popular and enduring colors of all time in the French Quarter is something we colloquially call French Quarter green, which is a green so dark it's almost black. Like when you open the paint lid, it looks like black, but then when you start painting it, you see it's a very, very dark green. And so I asked this woman, Renee, who's with the Vieux-Carré Commission, if, is that a real color? We all call it French Quarter green. Is that true? And she said, no, there's no real French Quarter green. The color she points people to is called Essex green. That's a Benjamin Moore color. So if any of you are looking to paint your shutters, go for Essex green. It's tried and true, and it also weathers very well and stands the test of time. So I think that's part of the reason it's so enduring. But interestingly, I asked her what some of the most popular colors were, and really the historical golds, rust reds. Those are very popular to this day. In the French Quarter, oranges. And I asked her, what is the most popular color that you are not allowing? And she said the most popular color by far that they deny is black. Black is having a moment, and they will not allow it in the French Quarter. So anywhere else in the city, and there are several black buildings even recently popping up on Britannia and other places, but not in the Quarter.
Yeah, we have a few in the book, I believe.
Yeah, we have, I think, one black house in the book, and it was, it's actually a church that now has been restored to a private residence, and it's black, but they have these adorable little pink flowers in the front, and in the book you'll see that. So it has some color in that way. We did organize each of the chapters by color. It was Danielle's brilliant idea, and we thought, well, that'll be fun, and then we realized how hard that would be. Because some colors, you're like, where does peach go? Does it go in the orange chapter? Does it go in the pink chapter? It's not quite either. And so we had a lot of discussion with the art director about that. But this page is one of, I think, all of our favorites in the book. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So part of this experience for a year was sort of like one long Easter egg hunt. You know, you'd just walk around, and after a while, I started noticing the attic vents. I was just trying to find something that wasn't just a house. Here's a house, turn the page, here's another house. So I was looking for little details to highlight. And I started noticing the attic vents that are underneath the front porch, usually. And so I literally photographed these. Again, no one ever asked me what I was doing, but I would lean over the yard. I never stepped foot on anybody's property, but I would just lean my camera stretched with a lens like this and kind of line it up. And I did a couple like that, and then I was turning in the photos, I kind of thought, wow, this would be a great, double-page spread of all the colors. And so yeah, that was a kind of very hard thing to photograph because you really had to line it up just right. But all those are authentic colors. None of these are photoshopped. You could do 10 more books on these things. And it was just so fun. It could be a house that was kind of run down, needed some love, a little care as far as painting and woodwork. But these things were there looking bright and colorful always.
And what's interesting about this is the backgrounds that you see behind them are not put there. Like that is the color of the porch roof. So you see the green one with the yellow vent, that underside of that porch is that color green. So because people look at this and think that we just put colors behind them, that is the colors. Which is interesting because we all know that so many people here use the porch blue, but not everybody.
Yeah.
New
I'd say
Orleans are
the hardest part about this book is I haven't turned it off yet. So literally on the way here, I saw like 5 of these, and I thought, wow, I need to shoot those. I'm like, no.
Like, stop.
Stop.
We only have about 8 minutes left, so we should open it up if anyone has any questions.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, do we?
He's got a mic.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
I can't see in the light.
Yeah.
So, somebody have a question back there? I don't see. Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
wait.
I'm like blinded in the light.
Yeah.
You. Thank you.
So you mentioned, right, the Haitian, the West African,
Mhm.
European, and Spanish influences. One of the influences that I did not hear you talk about yet was specifically the Sicilian influence
Oh, yeah.
of the late 1800s, early
Absolutely.
1900s.
Contessa Antolina.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the Antolina
That's the
tomb.
Sicilian Burial
Benevolence.
Society.
Yeah.
Beautiful blue.
He's doing it
And
already.
Yeah.
It-
Again, a very Catholic society. So the same kind of cultural, religious roots. But absolutely, great point.
you go
If-
go to Metairie Cemetery. Look at that. It's a gorgeous mausoleum with a barrel vault with the cloud effect.
It's absolutely the Sicilians brought
Yeah.
color. If we just experienced St. Joseph's Day, a week ago, and if you go to a St. Joseph's altar, you see the explosion of color. Well, they were just as colorful in their houses. And, many of those Catholic traditions were very similar. Blue for the Virgin Mary was something that was represented in both French, Spanish, and Italian cultures. So it's interesting that they definitely had an influence because the Sicilians occupied a big part of the French Quarter during the sort of mid to late 19th century. So,
They dominate the back part of the quarter. If you look, there are some street tiles where occupying, noticing where businesses used to be and a stable, and the original Angelo Borcato.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't see. Yes, sir.
You mentioned all the cultural influences, and I wonder what made it so individualistic.
Oh, that's an
I mean, that is
excellent
something that endures to today, right? Why are we still such a colorful city? Because the people who live here are cool.
I know.
I mean, they embrace color. That we live in a tropical place, and we talk about the landscape of our city a little bit as well, because that plays into it. Like we have flowers in bloom at all times of the year. We have really tropical foliage that plays into it. But at the end of the day, you got to be a little kooky to live here. And I think we're all a little kooky in the best way. And I think people, even to this day, really embrace color. And I think that's a wonderful thing about it.
Here's the thing. We're not Atlanta.
Oh, no offense to Atlanta.
All right, time to go. Time to go.
But really, when you look at a house like this, and y'all, many of you who are from here probably know this house, it's like a doll house.
Yeah, we really try to find houses that were not heavily photographed or whatever. And, you type in New Orleans and house, and, I didn't want to do those houses. But this one,
This
I
one
had
we had
to.
to include,
Yeah.
even though it's so well known.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is this house, this block, isn't anywhere near here. This is way uptown. I think that's in Tremé.
Yeah, not far.
And look at the colors; they're so similar.
Yeah.
So sort of people are feeling this in a lot of ways, but it's just funny how they're not. This isn't around the corner from each other.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yes, I don't know if I can see everybody.
He gave me the microphone
Yes.
a few minutes ago.
There you are.
A little bit blinded by the light.
Okay, so I'm going to switch to something technical and historic. So in the mid-1980s, we bought a very old house in Edgard in St. John Parish and moved it and restored it. And we did have the paint analysis done back then. And so the woodwork and the inside and out, the shutters, turned out to be what the paint analysts called a pumpkin, but really looks a lot like terracotta. And it was actually made from ground bricks.
Yes.
Okay, so I just wondered if you discovered that, because it's not far from New Orleans where it was.
No.
If you discovered that in any of the New Orleans.
Oh, we hadn't found that yet.
I hadn't heard that.
No.
That's fascinating.
Michelle Duhan, who we've referenced a few times, wrote a technical chapter in the beginning of the book that really looked at how color was made historically. They did use a lot of different types of pigments. The ochres that we had a picture of were pretty common, but it wouldn't surprise me that in the 19th century people got creative and they used what was available, and if those red bricks were something that even earlier, so even sort late 1700s.
Very
So
interesting.
That's fascinating.
Wow.
Yes.
In terms of like getting the houses painted, what's the percentage of people who actually paint their own house? Or are they primarily done just by pros?
Today? Or historically?
Yeah, today.
That's a good
I would
question.
have no idea.
No, I mean, I would think it's mostly professional
I would.
companies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
it's kind of
Mainly
dangerous,
because our houses are tall.
but
Right.
Chris
Hard
makes
to
this
get to.
point, he's made this point a few times that, and we all, those of us who
Oh,
live here
right.
know this, like, the side of a building might not look
Yeah,
like the front.
a lot of these houses look great from the front, but you just look a little left and a little right, and you're like, woo, all right.
Luckily, our houses are often close together.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can we say Potemkin Village?
But that is an excellent question. We didn't really look at
a good question.
who does it, though. Yes, sir.
I go to Trinity Church on Jackson Avenue and tell someone to look for the pink church.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
And I think it's historically correct from way back when.
I hope that it is. It's such a beautiful color.
I hope
would
it
love
is
to know
too.
that, though.
I'm sure the Trinitarians would have it no other way.
The PRC has done work where to do house histories, where we would go into that archive, the notarial archive, and chase the chain of title from the original plot of land, ownership from the original plot of land all the way through to today. And in some of those records, if you're lucky, and it's not for every house by any means, you may find original building contracts written in French or Spanish in some cases, that are the contract between the owner and a builder or a painter that specifies specifically like what the house needs to be color-wise, what kind of paint they use. And when we would find those, they were like gold, So in the notarial archive, if you haven't been there, it is really a treasure trove of information about the city.
You kind of touched on this already, but since the VCC is the only one that has purview over exterior color, when you build in the HDLC, they can tell you everything about the exterior of a house. Like I've had to go to City Hall with buckets of bricks and grout samples. Like where else in America would you do that? But they,
Really?
but they can't tell you what color. Why do you think they decided that was the one choice you can make on the exterior of your home?
Well, it seems kind of impossible. It takes so much time for the VCC staff to even regulate the color of the buildings in the French Quarter. It is a huge amount of the work that they do. And so I think, especially when you think about Uptown, which has 18,000 contributing structures in the National Register District, it would just be wholly overwhelming. And also, I think people would really hate historic preservation it can get a bad rap. We love historic preservation. It keeps our city authentic, but I think people would feel it was really intrusive if the HLC did have a purview over color. So.
Yeah. And also, as Louis, and the last point, as Louis Aubert points out in this book, paint is not going to, well, I shouldn't say will not damage a house, because if you paint with the wrong material, it could. But color changes, right?
Yeah.
If you paint your house a certain color and you don't like it, you can just paint
Yeah.
it, and it's not going to change the architecture.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I would be a terrible executive director if I didn't end this by saying that the other reason we did this book was to raise money for our nonprofit. So the PRC, the Preservation Resource Center, is a 50-year-old nonprofit dedicated to preserving the city's authentic architecture, neighborhoods, and cultural identity. And so we hope that you love our book. We hope you'll purchase it. And if you do, feel good, because it's supporting a very worthy cause here in the city.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you for coming.